Hi guys, today we're covering brake upgrade on the rear axle of using F chassis rear calipers on an E chassis car. So in today's video we'll be fitting these brakes onto an E82 135i n55 version. Now this car already has upgraded front brakes, AP Racing, and it still has the standard rear brakes. So the original 2-piston Brembo calipers with 324mm disc with 22mm thickness. It does occasional track days, so since the front brakes are significantly better than the rears, it makes sense to also upgrade the rears just to try and balance it out a little bit. Now let's have a look what we've got for the rear. So this car has a large handbrake, 185mm, and a deep hub 77mm, which makes the upgrade really quite easy. And let me talk you through it, what you'll need to fit it. So we've got a set of refurbished F chassis calipers that used to look like this, which were then shot blasted, powder coated, rebuilt with new seals, cleaned up. They've got new bleed valves, and we've got the F chassis rear discs, 345mm by 24mm thick, commonly found on F3X cars with large rear handbrake, 185mm cavity. I've had them custom machined or engraved, if you like, to try and match the fronts, and the colour we picked for the calipers was similar to the ones of the front calipers. It's not exactly the same, but it's close enough. So, considering the car's rear hub setup, so deep hub and big handbrake, all we need is a set of eccentric bushings or inserts that we'll need to install into the calipers. These are the M10s, and we'll need a set of washer spacers to center the caliper. So these discs are around the 66mm height, and the discs on the car are around the 77mm height. Now the calipers, so the F chassis calipers, sit probably around about 4 or 5mm further out than the E chassis calipers, than these ones. So that's half of the trouble of centering the caliper across the disc, and the other half of the trouble will be taken care of by these washers. And we'll also need slightly longer bolts. So I think the standard bolts are 27mm long, and these are 35mm long. So give or take, it should be a perfect fit once everything's installed. And now the good news is the rear axle on this car has already been rebuilt, and it already has Hell Performance braided lines. If you can get to the actual badge. And there's no problem with seized unions because everything is more or less brand new, or rather about a year old. So we'll pull all this apart, install the disc. We'll have to trim the backing plate ever so slightly to accommodate the new bigger caliper. Once the disc is on, we can adjust the handbrake. We can then use the washers to try and line the caliper up, connect it all up, adjust it, bleed it. I usually use this bleeding kit. It's a pressure bleeder, or I also prefer a manual bleeding method, which requires 2 people, one pumping the pedal and the other one controlling the valve and the expulsion of brake fluid into a catch canister. So let's get cracking, and I'll show you the final result in a little bit. So now we're in process of removing the old caliper and disc and handbrake assembly, and one of the big differences between the new and the old calipers is the thickness of the mounting points. So these mounting points are significantly thicker, plus we need to space the caliper this way. So we need to gain some real estate in this area. So this is where they sit in here. So what we need to do is we need to get rid of this piece of the heat shield just to open up this gap here a little bit, so the caliper's got where to sit. Now we've disassembled the handbrake. If you want to know how to disassemble it and reassemble it easily, there is a video on my channel, so look it up. Everything to do with the handbrake. Now once that's off, you can unbolt the 2 10mm drives, which are there and there, and the 2 16mm drives, which the handbrake mechanism sits on just under there. Once you've done that, you can pry this handbrake backing plate away, and this dust shield will also come away. Then you can maneuver it into a position where it's easier to work with, and you can use whatever method you prefer. I'm going to use an angle grinder with a cutting disc to just cut it down there, go around where the pressing edge is and up. So we're still going to keep this section of the backing plate, but we are going to get rid of this section of the backing plate. Right, so let me go get the angle grinder, we'll give it a little trim, and then we'll continue. A few moments later, this is what it should look like. So we've just taken this little chunk off, and we've gained some real estate to mount the caliper. I've also trimmed these little edges here because the caliper is slightly bigger on the outer edges. So just make a judgment call once you're installing it to see whatever works. After some fiddling, it looks like this. The only thing I struggled a little bit with is when I cut this little piece off. This side was okay, but I didn't take enough off of this side. So if you can, when you're cutting this out, sort of come square down and across, just to have a little bit more area there for the calipers to mount. Now, I've only used a 4mm washer, and the caliper seems to have centered perfectly. So that's the gap on the inside, and that's the gap on the outside. You could probably get away with 3mm washer spacer, but 4 is ideal. It works perfectly fine, and I'm happy with the gaps. And if you look inside, you should be able to see how the washers are fitted.
I got that rocket.
Hold up.
So now the line is connected, cleaned up, everything is tightened the way it's supposed to be, and onto fitting the pads. So I've got a set of barely used F8X pads, so the M pads, M compound, which should be really good for what this car is actually used for. So BMW branding, Textar, and they're square edged pads. So once they're on, they should clean up really well. You've got the fitting kit that will hold the pads in. We'll reuse the old one because it was in good condition. The pins and the springs were not damaged. You can replace them if you want, but if yours is in good condition, you can keep it as it is. And finally, a bit of ceramic grease or ceramic brake paste on the brake pads that needs to go just on these edges here, and a little bit where the piston contacts the back of the pad to prevent them from squealing. Now, whatever you do, do not use petroleum-based greases, so things like copper grease, because when it comes into contact with the dust seals on the pistons, with these seals here, they will actually deteriorate very quickly, and the petroleum that's contained within the grease will damage them. Right, and after a few moments, we've bled it using this Type 200 fluid. We bled it manually because that pressure bleeder there contains standard brake fluid, which is a DOD 4 road specific, where the Type 200 has slightly higher boiling temperature, and we were using this one. So to make our life easier, we just topped up the reservoir in the car and used the two persons method of pumping it and taking about this much out until the fluid ran clear without any air bubbles in it. And that's it. The handbrake's also adjusted. Should be all good. Everything's tightened up and torqued as it should. And now we're going to hopefully fit the wheels and pray that they fit, but that's not guaranteed. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next one.